The Travel Transformation Podcast is proud to be partnered with Give the Goodness Global, an amazing global outreach project helping families in need all over Southeast Asia and beyond. Please check them out at Instagram.com/Give the Goodness Global today. And now on to the podcast episode.
Welcome to the Travel Transformation Podcast, where we talk all things travel and all things transformation, exploring the life-changing potential of solo travel, intentional travel, and location-independent working. Whether you're an aspiring digital nomad or simply wish to boost your confidence through epic travel experiences, I'm here to motivate and inspire you to go after all your wildest dreams. I'm Jessica Grace Coleman, author, certified travel coach, founder of the Travel Transformation Company, and your host for the Travel Transformation Podcast. Travel changed my life. Now let's change yours. You ready? Let's go. Welcome to the Travel Transformation Podcast, where we talk all things travel and all things transformation. My name is Jessica Grace Coleman and I'm your host. And today I'm talking to author and mentor Elaine Mercedes Mendoza. Elaine Mercedes Mendoza is an author and mentor who helps people unleash the labels that control their lives while bringing awareness to how to heal them so that they can create the life they want and deserve. On top of becoming a diversity and inclusion ambassador, Elaine enjoys traveling the world and getting to know people from many different countries and beliefs. As a traveler, she has written many travel and inspirational articles for brands and magazines. And after a successful career as a freelance writer and educator, Elaine now shares her expertise with others. She also enjoys going on adventure and foodie experiences while continuing to spread messages of inclusion, love for the world, and compassion. The Gandhi Foundation called her a changemaker in 2017. Her book, Humanized, The Journey Back to You Without Labels, made it to number 1 under LGBTQ memoirs and number 2 under spirituality. In this episode, we discuss the power of labels and getting unstuck from the stories we tell ourselves, Elaine's journey from Venezuela to the US and the visa issues she encountered, her travels and what she learned from them, her book, her mentor services, and much, much more. I really enjoyed getting to know Elaine, so let's head straight to the interview. Hi, Elaine. Welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Oh, good. How are you?
Good. I'm great. Thank you. Thank you for asking. Okay. So to start with, please can you give me and our listeners a bit of background info on you, where you're from, what you do, and a little bit about your story so far?
A little bit about my story so far. Okay. Well, I grew up in America. I grew up in Washington, D.C. area from an immigrant family from Venezuela. And at some point, I guess I had what people call a midlife crisis, but I think it's a midlife breakthrough. I realized I was tired of the way the system is set up, and I decided I wasn't going to live my life stuck in a 9-to-5 job anymore. And I took a huge risk. I left a very secure job to travel the world, but not only travel the world, but find a new way to make a living that's not so enslaving.
Totally with you on that. So what job were you doing before?
I actually work as a mentor and mostly in transitions. And I'm also an author and speaker. So I do get some speaking engagements and I do a lot of podcasts. I do a lot of teaching as well, one-on-one. Basically help people through things that I have been through as well.
And I wanted to, you mentioned you're speaking there. I wanted to dive into your TED Talk. So congratulations on that, by the way. That's a huge achievement. It's titled The Power of Labels to Change Your Story. And yeah, I watched it. I loved it. It's very powerful, very thought-provoking. I'll put the link in the show notes because I encourage everyone to go and watch it. Let's start with that because you go into your story a little bit in the TED Talk. So first, I want to know about the process of getting a TED Talk because I know it's not an easy thing to do. What was that like? And then secondly, why is this subject so important to you? Why did you want to do the talk on this topic in particular?
Funny enough, I didn't want to do the TED Talk on this topic. I had auditioned for TED probably 7 or 8 times before I actually got it. And I remember a speaker mentor. You know, we do invest in a lot of mentors and coaches to help us perfect our skills and improve. And I said, I don't know why I'm not getting accepted. I think I have a wonderful story. But I wanted to talk about other things. I wanted to talk about travel. I wanted to talk about how to write a book and get your story out there. And she said, there's probably a story that you're afraid of telling. And I started thinking about it and I'm like, oh, no, I'm not sure I want to tell that story. That's too personal. That's too personal. And she's like, sometimes it's the story that we're most afraid of telling that is the one that we should tell. And that's when I decided to open up about my struggles with US immigration, because I think there's a lot of negative propaganda, especially in the last 10 years in the United States, against immigrants. And I come from an immigrant family, and the story always is immigrants come here to take advantage of the system if they only did things correctly, And I think my family was a very good example of doing everything by the book and following every law and still being rejected. I think it's an important story to tell, but I was afraid of telling it because when I did my TED Talk in 2019, it was still a Trump presidency. I don't really discuss politics. I did know that my story was indirectly political because it was touching on many issues, from LGBTQ rights to immigrant rights to women's rights. I seem to have triggered a lot of people. So that was very difficult for me as well, after I did the TED Talk, to get some negative comments or people who made the effort to even find my personal email account to write negative, hateful, discriminatory letters.
How do you deal with that, getting that kind of feedback? It's obviously not constructive criticism, it's just attacking you. That must be so hard to take personally. Can you talk a little bit about that, or have you done anything to sort of get over it, or how do you deal with it?
Sure. Interestingly enough, I would say most of the feedback was good, but it's always those hateful, racist ones that really get under your skin. And I'm like, well, I did something correctly if I triggered this person. And then I started thinking, wait a minute, if I'm causing this type of reaction in people, that means on some level, no matter how small, I have triggered their ability to maybe think differently, to maybe think that, well, maybe I am racist. Maybe I am looking at this situation incorrectly. And people lash out on you because you have made them think in some other way. And I started to see, wait a minute, 95% of the feedback is good. Why am I giving these people power over me? There was a learning curve because, I'm not a famous person. So getting that type of attention suddenly, it was a new experience for me. And I had to work my way around that. Now I see it as, oh, I did something right. Now I don't take it so personally.
Yeah, I love that way of looking at things, because I think that can apply to lots of things. You put yourself out there, and like you say, 95% of the feedback is brilliant, and you will still focus on that 5% that is horrible. Like, it's just the way we're wired, isn't it? We'll sort of discount all the good stuff that people say about us and just focus on the negative. And yeah, your way of looking at it is so great. You're doing something good. You're doing a good thing if you're triggering these people and making them think differently and making them question why they're thinking this. So I love that way of looking at it. So in the talk, you explain the process of moving to the US when you were younger and then graduating. And after you started on your path to your big dream, being on Broadway, you were told you could no longer live in the US. So what did you do after you received that letter about your visa? Like, which steps did you have to take, either physically or mentally, to proceed with your life? What happened after that moment?
Yes, that was a really difficult moment because I lived, I studied elementary school, high school, college, everything in the US. So I wasn't going to be a new immigrant. I was a very long-term immigrant. It basically put a stop on my career entirely because I needed to focus on the legalization process. And what ended up happening at the time is I wanted to do everything correctly. Like, I wanted to do everything the right way. And that it blew up in my face. So what I did afterwards was I needed to survive. So I needed to do what many immigrants do, is accept work that was beneath my pay level. I would have these amazing contracts that would pay me under the table, but at the same time, pay me very little for the amount of work that I was supposed to do. So for example, I ended up managing a recording studio in New York, very glamorous job. I would meet famous people all the time, but I would be expected to work for $10 an hour in New York City and manage the whole studio. So it ended up being a situation of putting myself in a situation where I was constantly exploited. But people wanted my skills because I was college educated. I did have a background in entertainment. So they wanted my skills and they're like, we can get her, but for half the price. So when people hear of the immigrant story, they think we're taking advantage of the system. But from the other side of the table, we're terribly taken advantage of. So there's two sides to every story. And I don't think we get the chance to tell our side of the story. So I ended up working at the recording studio and I ended up temping for years. Temping in New York City is very common, especially in such a big city. And I ended up doing that because they never noticed. They never asked for a green card or a passport. Eventually, as life would have it, I did get married. I was in my late 20s. I got married. Ultimately, that's how I was able to eventually become a U.S. citizen. Yes.
Yeah. And when you finally got your U.S. citizenship, is that when you went traveling around the world?
Yes, because you have to realize when you're stuck in this immigration situation, you can't leave because you're not allowed back in. And around that time, Venezuela was becoming a dictatorship. So it's not like I had the option of like, hey, let me check this out. South America sounds nice. No, it was becoming a dictatorship. So I had no desire of going back there. So I ended up basically changing my life. I couldn't pursue what I went to school for. And by the time I became a US citizen, 14, 15 years had gone by. I couldn't go back to New York and audition. I just lost 15 years of professional time. I ended up traveling, becoming nomadic 3 years later. So to answer your question, yes.
Nice. Okay. Well, so that's a long time then where you didn't feel like you could go back to Venezuela or you didn't want to, and you couldn't leave, like you say, you couldn't do the career you wanted to do. So did you feel like you were kind of in limbo for 15 years? Like, how did that feel and how did you deal with it?
It felt like I was an existential prisoner. I was a criminal of this society. I actually ended up writing about it. I wrote a poem called Criminal of Birth. It's also, you can find it on YouTube. And the very first time I did an interview in public, this very nice man interviewed me and he said, can you read this poem for us? And I was like, oh, okay. The second I read that poem in public, the comments were so painful and hateful that he had to actually disable the comments because I was explaining the American experience from the immigrant perspective. But I understand that there's a lot of patriotic people in that love their country, and whatever I say is very triggering to them because it's not their experience. So it's almost like telling a child, hey, Santa Claus, a lot of people feel that way whenever you say anything negative about America, they're very offended. It doesn't make me anti-American. I'm simply sharing what my experience was like. So yeah, it was hard. It was an existential prisoner. That's the best way I can explain it. You can't work legally. You can't travel. You're just kind of surviving in survival mode for a long time.
Wow. And you sort of explain it more in the TED Talk. So I would encourage people to go and watch that. But just for our listeners to explain, so you had a visa, but it ended when you ended education. Is that right? And that's what happened?
Yes, my parents had, at the time, Venezuela was a very wealthy country, and we were in a very good financial situation, the country itself. So they had an indefinite business visa where they could come to the US and invest. And they did. They bought homes. They put us through college. They invested a lot of money into the US. The only thing is we couldn't get anything out of the US. They would give us a 1-year work permit after college. And what ended up happening is, as soon as I finished college, so did my visa. Can't be in school forever. And a lot of people say, well, immigrants want to take advantage of the system. The system doesn't even give us a chance because we have an expiration date. We can go to school in the US. We can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars because it's not cheap to go to school in the US. We just are not allowed to stay there, basically. It's the best business deal in the world for the US.
Yeah, gosh, that is crazy. I didn't know anything about this until I watched your TED Talk. So yeah, I think it's important that we sort of get that message out there for people who don't understand how it works and, all that kind of thing. So you mentioned that you went traveling. Where did you go and what did you learn?
Yes. Well, imagine being a prisoner for 15 years I was like, oh my God, I'm free. Where did I not go? Might be the right question. I started by going to the Czech Republic. At the time, it was still called the Czech Republic. And from there, I went to Italy and Austria and Thailand. And my plan was to take a 1-year sabbatical. That was really my plan. But 1 year has become 8.5 years now. And during that time, I thought, okay, it's time for me to go back home, to go back to the US. And then I had reverse culture shock of, wait a minute, after you experience so much freedom and so many other opportunities, it's impossible to try to fix yourself back into that box that you were in. It's impossible. I think you grow when you travel, you learn new things. It's impossible to go back to a 9-to-5 existence. I can't do it. I don't want to do it.
Definitely. And I know you believe in the importance of immersing ourselves in different cultures and getting to know people who are different from us. And you say it's a viable solution to prevent further prejudice and racism in our world. So can you expand more on this, about what you mean by that?
Since the start of the pandemic, many people have been reconsidering the ways in which they have fun. After a horribly isolating couple of years, we're now craving connection, community, and real deep conversation. We don't want to do the same old stuff every time we meet up with friends. We want something new, something different, something more. Enter the Flip the Script Party Packs. These digital party packs will help you flip the script on your usual parties and flip the script on your lives. Yes, this is self-development, but not as you know it. When you buy a Flip the Script party pack, you'll get taken to a super secret page on our online portal where you'll be guided through your very own Flip the Script party with videos, fun worksheets, and printables to help you throw the best Flip the Script party ever. There's a party pack for everyone and every situation. Mindset makeover, business bestie, life goals and legacy, birthday boost, hen-do hootenanny, and team building takeover, all designed to help you have a great time in a fun, collaborative setting. They're also perfect for when you're meeting people on the road and you want to get to know your new travel buddies. Small talk's dead. It's time to get deep with a Flip the Script party. Just head to traveltransformationcoach.com/party to purchase, or get all 6 party packs free when you sign up to the Flip the Script Digital Nomad Academy at traveltransformationcoach.com/academy. And now let's get back to the Travel Transformation Podcast.
Yes, I think American culture in general, and I can only speak from an American perspective because that's where I grew up and that's what I know. They don't really encourage you to travel sometimes. I remember when I said, oh, I'm going to live in Mexico for the next 4 months. Oh, Mexico's so dangerous. You can get shot there and there's cartel issues and drug issues. I'm like, wait a minute. Just let me remind you, you can get shot in the US at any moment, at any time. So this sort of hypocritical perspective that it's dangerous everywhere else in the world except the US. And I like to bring a reality check that I've been to so-called dangerous countries and I felt very safe. I felt very welcomed. I think the main thing I learned is to create stories about people from experience, not what you heard on the 6 o'clock news about other people. Because I think if you're living in a small town in America, for example, and you don't have any experience outside of your small town, you're going to believe everything the news tells you. The news has this big power to change your mind about big issues. So these small town people are also the ones who are going to vote in the next election and believe these things. So I think as soon as you travel and you realize that there's been a lot of propaganda against other people, you realize, oh my God, that was just propaganda. It's not even true. Mm-hmm. So it has the power to break that prejudice, that racism that we have been conditioned, quite honestly, conditioned to believe about other people.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think it's quite a similar situation in the UK as well for people who have maybe never traveled and all the media saying all this stuff about dangerous places. And I'm like, have you been to London? Like London's can be very dangerous. Like it's what you're used to and what you compare it to and everything you hear on the news and the media. And it's until you go yourself and actually make your own decisions about it, I don't think you can really know for sure. So yeah, I totally agree with that. Now, please, can you tell me about your book, Humanized? What is it about? Who's it for? And what made you want to write it?
When I started traveling in 2015, I was keeping a journal, but it was really for my own personal use. And as I started writing it, I thought to myself, there's a topic that keeps coming up, and it's the topic of labels. It was an accident, really. I wasn't planning. I was not planning on writing a book. And then the more I kept writing and seeing what was there, I'm like, this is useful. This is useful not just to me, but to other people. But not everyone can quit their job and move to another country, but people can still learn the lessons that I have learned along the way. And I realized that even though my labels are different, I realized that we all have labels that we attach our self-worth to, especially in countries like the US and the UK. And I have spent time in the UK. I was there 4 months last year. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, the UK has a lot of issues that the US has as well with immigrants, with racism. They just do it in a better accent. And I thought to myself, okay, how can I share the lessons that I have learned through my travels? How can I share it with other people that don't have the same? You don't have to leave everything to learn these lessons, but you can still learn them, from people that have. So I realized that there were 10 labels that really keep us prisoners of our own lives. And this applies to everyone, doesn't just apply to me. So I thought that, we all have a story that we tell ourselves. So my story could be, oh my gosh, I was an immigrant, I was rejected. I could really get stuck in that story and feel bad about myself forever. Or I could learn to look at the story like, yes, this happened. It's a part of my story, but let's move on. Let's move on from this. I also talk about I am not my nationality for obvious reasons. It's a piece of paper. And I talk about how that label alone causes so much grief between us, as people, as countries, our ability to work, to make a living in most of the world, except where we're from, supposedly. I talk about I'm not my religion and how religion also controls us to a certain extent. I talk about I'm not my sexuality. I talk about how the LGBTQ plus community is discriminated in many parts of the world, still in this day and age. It's illegal in some countries. And I'm like, wow, how interesting that you can be the kindest, sweetest person in the world, but because you love somebody of your same gender, boom, you're labeled as this terrible person. So I talk about that because I am a part of the LGBTQ plus community. I talk about I'm not my job because I think that in countries like the UK and like the US, people are very attached to what they do for a living, as if it determines how valuable they are as people. And I think we need to take a step back and accept that our job is just what we do to make a living. It's not who we are. So basically 10 labels that affect us the most. And I break it down. I did research on it. I gave the book to a behavioral scientist to read it. And I said, hey, this is what I've learned through my life experience. This is what she has learned through her research as a scientist. And she supported my book, basically, because I didn't want to say, hey, this is how life is. I wanted to have some scientific validity behind it. And I think if people get rid of these labels, they will feel a sense of valuing themselves in a way that is true and not so superficial.
Yeah. I mean, I love everything you just said. I specifically love the bit where you were talking about the stories we tell ourselves, because I talk about that as well. And there's so many we can tell ourselves. And the idea of getting stuck in that story is so relatable, I think, to so many people. And it's hard to sort of get out of that loop sometimes, even if you're aware of it, that it might not be true anymore. It might have come from someone else, or it might have been put on us and we've internalized it. Whatever happened, it can be really hard to get out of that like loop of being stuck in that story. So do you have any recommendations or ideas on how to get out of that? I mean, I'm guessing reading your book is one of them. Would be one thing to do.
I think to get out of your story is you have to realize what the lesson is from the story. Because if I keep telling myself, oh my God, I could have been a Broadway star and I'm not, and I'm such a failure. If I get stuck in that story, ask yourself, how productive is this story for your life now in the present moment? Because this happened to me 25 years ago. I'm not even that person anymore. So I think we need to realize that our life is not supposed to be one story. Our dreams can change. We need to give ourselves permission to have our dreams change, and also to create other stories, happier ones, more productive ones, or more peaceful stories. It's not even about being successful, but having a peaceful life. I don't think people value the right things sometimes. Everyone's so busy getting ahead and the rat race and making more money that they don't stop to think, wait a minute, is this what I want? Or is this what society has told me I should want? Because I make less money now than I did when I had a 9-to-5 job, but I'm 1,000% more peaceful. I'm happier. My health has improved. Why don't we value those things as well?
Definitely need to look at what we're sort of measuring and see if we're measuring the wrong thing. So you mentioned this before, that you're a mentor with an expertise in big life transitions. So can you tell me more about this and what work you do and what you offer people help with?
Yes. By default, again, this has happened by default, just like the book. People started asking me for advice. They saw that I was traveling the world, and I've traveled extensively, and I've lived in every place 2-3 months. And they're like, what do you do that I'm not doing? People had questions. And then I started to realize that I was attracting people in transition. So people that wanted to move to another country, they would ask me, how do you move to another country? And then things got a little bit deeper. People started asking me about family problems, or I've always been that friend that was there for people going through big things. And I'm like, wait a minute, I have a skill here. I have very deep empathy for people, which is kind of a double-edged sword. It's a gift, but you have to be careful how you use that gift. And now I help people in transitions. What does that mean? People going through a big life change. It can be loss, it can be divorce, breakups, it can be trauma even, and narcissistic type abuse. And I basically help people with things that I myself have been through. Because I think you can have 20 years of education, but no one understands you unless you have been through it yourself. As I opened up, I realized that I started to attract people that wanted healing in some way or help in some way. So transitions, I call it transitions.
Nice. So how do you do this? Is this like online? Do you do Zoom sessions with people? How does it work?
Yes, I do Zoom sessions with people, and they can find me on Instagram or Facebook. I do have a business page that I'm actually fixing it. I've had the same website for a while now, so it's time for a little remodeling, but I will have that up soon again. It's finally Elaine, and I help people one-on-one on Zoom sessions, mostly, yes.
Great. Okay. And we'll put the links in the show notes as well. And I asked you where your favorite places in the world are, and I know that is a ridiculously hard question for travelers. And you said Czechia, Thailand, and Venezuela. So can you tell me why these places are so special to you?
I think each one of those places shaped me in some way. So for example, obviously Venezuela, I have some wonderful memories. We used to go in the summers, and I used to visit my grandmother in the 80s. And I just have very good memories of it. It's a beautiful country. It's too bad that it has so many political problems. But I've always felt some attachment to it because that's my roots, that's my heritage and my ancestors. Thailand felt very different. It was the only place I went to that I felt like I was on another country. I don't know, everything just felt so different. And I think the Czech Republic to me represents a new beginning. It was the moment I decided to leave a 9-to-5 existence, to leave America and start a new life. So Czechia, as they call it now, represents that for me, a new beginning. It was the first taste of nomadic life. But I love so many countries besides these three. It's hard to narrow it down.
It is very hard. And you're also a big foodie. So do you have any favorite foodie places that you've been to or any recommendations?
Foodie places. Let's see. Turkey has fantastic food, and I don't think they're necessarily known for it, but very underrated country. Their food is amazing. Greece has delicious food as well. Thailand is a given if you like spicy food. Mexico, of course. And I have noticed a trend in my travels of Venezuelan foods opening up all over the world. And I think people don't know what Venezuelan food, they're like, is it spicy? I'm like, no, we're not Mexican. Like different country, different place. But they don't know what it is. And then when they try it, they're like, oh my God, where has this been my whole life? Venezuelan food is quite good. I recommend it if you haven't tried it.
I don't think I have tried it. So I need to, add that to the list.
They have some places in London, just letting you know.
Nice. Okay, I'll have to look them up. Okay, great. So you mentioned there, I will put these in the show notes, as I said, but you're on Instagram and Facebook. Is it as Finally Elaine?
Finally Elaine, yeah. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram.
Great.
And
And I'll put the link to your book and your TED Talk in the show notes as well. So my last question is, do you have anything else you want to mention or any last message you want to get across before we go?
Any last message I want to get across is we all have the chance to change our lives, no matter at what age. And I think something I wanted to say today to honor the recent passing of my grandmother 10 days ago is that she lived to 103 years old.
Wow.
And one of the questions I asked her was, Grandma, how? She wasn't the best eater. She ate bad foods. And I'm like, how do you live to this long? Her advice to me, and I want to share it with you guys, is she said, minimize stress. She said, pain is inevitable in life. You go through breakups. Your parents pass away. Pain, there's no way around it, but through it. But she's like, stress, you choose stress. You don't have to have a stressful job. You don't have to be in a stressful relationship. You can choose to be happy. And I think that's what made her live to 103.
Wow. I'm sorry for your loss, but 103 is an incredible age to get to. My own nan is nearly 98, so she's nearly there as well. And she always tells me to travel while you're young and see the world while you're still physically able to do it. And yeah, that's one of the reasons why I just try and go as many places as I can. So yes, definitely great advice there from the grandmothers. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming on today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you. I did too. And nice to meet you.
Yes, you too. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Travel Transformation Podcast with me, Jessica Grace Coleman. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate it if you could please subscribe, rate and review, and spread the word, because it's my mission to help as many people as possible to flip the script on their lives and transform through travel. And remember, life is short, so let's make sure it's nothing short of amazing. Until next time, I'll catch you on the flip side.